brought together UCSF, Dignity Health, Kaiser Permanente for this luncheon and really unique session. I'm going to let Dr. Einar Sawyer, who I introduced earlier from UCSF, kind of talk about it. She's going to be moderating the session. We have incredible frontline innovators sharing what's going on. This is where it's happening. We talked about the art of the medical deal yesterday. This is kind of seeing it in action. So thank you.
Great, thank you for this opportunity. Are we set up with the first slide? I'm seeing a game on my computer.
Oh, look at this.
Okay, right, I'll just run it through here. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you. And this is really the first time we as Frontline Innovators have been given the stage and given a panel. And so for us, it's really very exciting. We've been innovating from the front lines for quite a while, but to be honest, we're not really thought of as innovators. I'm going to be here with my colleagues, Rich Roth from Dignity Health. And
new degree, without the expense and the time.
New liability, what can you say? So he's going to present some of the great innovative work happening at Dignity Health. And then Karen Cook from Kaiser, we're also very lucky to have her, the Director of Innovation Fund for Technology, who's going to present some innovative work from the front lines at Kaiser. I'm going to present sort of a broad overview, talk a bit about what we're doing at UCSF, some of our individual ways that we've come about it, and then we're going to ask each of them to do the same thing. We're going to talk about strengths and why we think we have unique things to bring to the table, and we'll also talk about challenges that we have. So in the introduction, one of the things I wanted to say is that oftentimes I will see this quote used reflective of what healthcare providers think about technology. And so if I can do anything today, I would like to dispel the myth that the healthcare system and healthcare providers reject or are afraid of or are slow to adopt, et cetera, technology in general. There are reasons why we have to be cautious about bringing new things in, and I alluded to that yesterday as well. But we really are looking for healthcare solutions as quickly as you are. We may not move as quickly. We have things, patients, we have responsibilities, things we need to protect and be diligent about. We also need to maintain scientific rigor, so we might be a little slower to just try new things. But we're really looking as fast and as hard as you are for effective solutions, and we want to partner with you every step of the way. So I had to look up David Brower because I'd seen this slide depicting healthcare providers slow to adopt technology over and over, this quote. He's actually from Berkeley, and he is probably the father of modern environmentalism. And this building is fairly new. This is the David Brower Center, but it's steeped with technology in sustainable energy and in sustainable resources. And they talk a lot about the technology in the building. So I thought it was really interesting how those things have come together. In the diffusion of ideas, this has been really well talked about as well. Most people think of us as over here. We're the laggards, right? But I really hope you'll look at us more as this and your partners in this by the end of the session. We are as excited as you are about the coalescing of forces, the perfect storm that's leading to this really great acceleration of technology and effective and innovative solutions. From healthcare reform to the advent of new technologies and the cost reduction in them that we haven't had before, disease entities and acceleration of aging, and just this raging entrepreneurship that's happening. So we're feeling the same things as you are. And in addition, we're experiencing them in a really firsthand way. So the forces at work in the changing landscape of healthcare, value-based care, ACOs, the shared decision, shared reward, shared risk models, collaboration, transparency, the whole move to a more highly distributed healthcare system. And at our institution in particular, we're very interested in precision medicine. And in the shared decision-making model of keep in mind that patient engagement, it isn't just something we're working on to get better Press-Ganey scores and the payments that may come with that, but we actually have good data now that it really translates to decreased complications and decreased readmission rates. So shared decision-making is extremely important on several fronts. And we've long been believers in patient empowerment. We haven't really known well how to do it. And as I said yesterday, we're bringing in behavioral scientists who are really leading to that, the edge on that field. And we're also, of course, always looking for decrease in costs. We know that the model's not sustainable. We have, if you look at the chart of lifetime survival versus cost, we are really bad outliers, the USA. I don't show the graph anymore because people, I think, have it. It's not really on your Google Glass, it's almost on your cornea. So we just all know that, and we've got to fix it. But we want to decrease costs not just in clinical care, but also in research and in the development of new technologies. And so we're trying to create more and more efficient models around all of those. In the demographics, again, this is pretty much seared into all of us. I think it's really quite astounding to know a couple of things, though, that in this period of increase in the older population, fourfold increase is going to happen in the 85-plus-year-old. That's one trend that we really need to talk about, and it's been talked well about here today. It's an opportunity as well as a challenge for us. And then the other thing is there's a new type of geriatric person, and I've coined the phrase the geriactive, because I think it's exciting, but we are seeing new types of injuries in a different substrate than we've seen before. In fact, this man has a posterior lateral incision on his thigh. That's really why I highlighted the photo, not for other reasons. And so he's clearly had a total hip replacement. So that's a new phenomenon. So again, we're experiencing forces like you are. We're experiencing them on the very, very, very front lines. And we're experiencing them as providers and healthcare deliverers, but we're also experiencing them in our patients when we communicate with them and they communicate with us, and in their family and their caregivers. So it is truly a frontline seat. And so we're trying to solve problems the best we can from where we are. And usually it ends up in two routes, like this nice article from the Harvard Business Review. When you need to do transformation, the combination of two things is really helpful: rebuilding, but reinventing. And so we're learning a lot about where solutions can fit into our current workflow and where that workflow really needs to be disrupted. And in these solutions, we're always looking for innovation in personnel, process, and technology. And I probably will say that too often to you, but I think if you keep that in mind, it'll help you be successful in whatever you're developing as well. So the traditional things about UCSF are there. We see a lot of patients, and a lot of patients are seen as inpatient and many as outpatient. And we also do science, and we've had a pretty good track record in science. And we also have done patent filing, patent issuing, and company formation, which is a side that a lot of people don't think of when they think of a hospital or a medical center or even an academic medical center. It's really upon us. If we find something that works, we discover something, we test it, we find it works, the onus is on us to get that up and out so more people can benefit from it, to not let it die at the end of the grant. So scaling novel technologies up and out of the university has been something we've worked on for a very long time. Hep B vaccine, artificial growth hormone, are some things that are pretty well known to you. But many, many patents have been filed and issued. And I would like to say it's not an easy process, but it's a really important process. And we work hard at that to get all these technologies to more people. We've had a lot of startup companies already, 90 life science companies, 40 of them down at Mission Bay, and this number is actually growing in the rate each year. But what we talk about a lot is how do we get from idea to impact? And what are the opportunities we have for that? Why are we uniquely positioned to be in that conversation? And how do we help for the pieces that we don't do well there or don't have the expertise in? How do we make those happen? So the reasons I think that Frontline Innovators have a unique place is we can really witness and experience the problems on our side, on the patient side, et cetera. We also can conceptualize solutions where they fit into the process or where the process needs to be disrupted. In addition, we do evaluation every step of the way, and there are probably 10 steps to get something as a digital health technology all the way to proof of concept. By the time it is at proof of concept, it's been well studied. We've looked for effectiveness in care and in cost. So imagine if you were an investor, how important that would be to you, or if you were going then to try to promote that to someone to use and have adoption of that, it lowers their risk as well. So evaluation should be implemented whether you're building outside or inside of the healthcare system, and we'd love to help more with that. But to get from idea to impact, you can see we need a multitude of disciplines that we actually don't have in the healthcare delivery system. So you're going to hear us over and over talk about the need for partnering. We have a track record of partnering at UCSF, but imagine a lot of these have been in pharma, diagnostics, and therapeutics. But now digital health is on the scene, thank goodness. It's very exciting. And we don't just think of it now as the fourth modality, which it was initially promoted as. We actually think of it as the great communicator. And it's the opportunity to deliver on the triple aims, to give better care to more people at lower cost, if we leverage it correctly, and if we work hard to keep moving from the promise to the power or the empower of digital health. And we'll talk about that briefly as well. So when we were looking at putting together our Digital Health Innovation Center, we wanted to address a few things. We really want to develop effective healthcare solutions, so we want to look hard at the problems. And as we're building, how do we support our frontline innovators? Because imagine they also have other jobs. There are other things that they're doing. So how do we support them better? And talk to them about things they've never been trained in. So biz dev, design, engineering, marketing, those types of things. So we started building processes around that. We've had to do that for the other industries, but remember, digital health moves a lot faster than an innovation in life sciences. So diagnostics, therapeutics will take years of research to get to the door, and digital health moves a lot faster than that. We want to develop and translate these innovations, like I said, scale them up and out of the university. We also want to develop the innovators, not just new things. So we built a four-pillar model: innovation, evaluation, integration, and education. We want to have an open door, so we're helping our innovators. We're also helping external innovators by helping them with clinical input early and often, study design, and how you would do implementation, and how would you monitor and track post-implementation, et cetera. The integration piece is interesting. I'm going to flip through each of these in a little bit of detail, and I'll get to that in just a second. In the innovation piece, we leverage a lot of existing capacity on campus. We have many of these centers I won't go into in detail, but that you've probably heard about: the QB3 Incubator, the Entrepreneur Society, Idea to IPO, the ITA. All of these things, we're not reproducing them, we're actually integrating them and leveraging them. So in the incubation piece of it, we have a portfolio. We have several projects that have risen to university recognition level that we think we can scale up and out. This is a virtual tumor board model or a multidisciplinary care platform. And it's precision team care, so we put pertinent data in a secure online space. We bring the experts around a virtual table, and we're giving them some support with clinical decision tools so that we're able to turn cases around instead of the average 4 weeks for patients waiting for tumor board or case conference in about 48 hours. And so you can imagine how that can have an impact on care, costs, and accessibility. This is a very interesting project. You could actually go in right now and sign yourself up for Healthy Heart. It's the digital version of Framingham's study, and we're going to be able to have probably 1 million patients in the next couple of years enrolled, and the American Heart Association has just embraced this as a platform. So we'll be able to gather a lot more data on patients, patient-reported data. They can escalate it to turning in a spit kit if they wanted to get genomics or lab studies involved. And we're going to be looking at various types of heart disease and helping to create risk stratification and communication directly from patients in a social media platform that's secure, back and forth. So this is a very powerful medium that's now being looked at by pharmaceutical companies in the clinical trial innovation space. If they can reach further out than the saturated environments around medical centers to do recruitment, and also if a lot of the trial study input can be done at, say, the remote oncologist's office rather than a sick person driving in 6 hours to do their clinical trials. So it can decrease study costs from $90 million a year down to 1/10 of that. So that's where it's impacting research as well. Tidepool is actually a nonprofit. It's taking all the proprietary data out of these siloed glucometers, putting it in an open source platform that then goes to visibility dashboards for both patient and provider. This is one of those unique things from the front lines of healthcare where pediatric endocrinologists were frustrated with not being able to access the data. They went to the companies said, no, you can't, it's our data. So they said it's actually the patient's data, and then 2 fathers from the Silicon Valley whose children were type 1 diabetics said, we want to help with this. They were serial CEOs, successful businessmen. They took this out as a nonprofit, and we've continued to co-develop this with them. They want it as a nonprofit, so that could never be siloed off again, and open APIs are available. This is an accelerator we have at UCSF. We've had therapeutics, diagnostics, and and device for a long time. We added the digital health track 2 years ago. This is an example of why we need you. We have a panel of 150 outside advisors. You saw on the Idea to Impact slide the many disciplines that we aren't strong in. So we really do look for outside advisors, and this panel helps us in a 360 review process of the proposals, but also in the 8-week accelerator reshaping process. Some of those advisors jump on the team with the startups, and they really transform this into something that could be scaled up and out of the university. And so just a quick example is this PRIME project, where it's an app, it's a mobile device that's looking at doing an intervention and support for adolescent schizophrenics, very challenging population. When we look at some of the key features of it, their failure to initiate, they can't do deferred gratification because they can't remember the reward process, so their ability to sustain healthy behaviors is really hard. All of those things sound like things I have to deal with, and they're actually things that many of us deal with in our lifestyle modification programs dealing with chronic disease. So the point is, lessons we're learning from each of our single innovations are really turning more into platforms, because we're seeing common patterns, especially in the chronic disease patients. And so we're trying to look at a couple of things as we move along. How do we get more integrated solutions rather than one-off apps or one-off solutions? And how do we then look at them as platforms for possible other similar difficulties in other diseases? The evaluation piece, I can't stress enough how much we want to help create improvements in research methodology. I think research methodology in digital health is a new field, and we're going to be asking for input of what you need for us to empower you as outside startups, so you're not waiting till the time you can get a pilot with university, because many steps can happen before that. And then when you do come to us, how can we make it easier for you? And we want to integrate not just communities, but we also want to work hard on this interoperability platform concept. There's a lot happening about aggregating data on the outside, and you saw some really good examples of it, and I think you've heard of Ginger.io and TickTrack and Validic, and they're really great platforms for that. They don't intersect with the clinical care record yet, and there are really times where that's important. So what we're working hard on is how to make those things happen. An early step is Epic is taking people's advice and creating some limited APIs. But in addition to that, we're going to need some other kind of middle layer where data from disparate sources comes in, gets reformatted, gets aggregated, algorithms are written, and it gets redirected into places that it can be used. And we say often that data is not very good or of no use if it's not contextualized or actionable. So that's a big piece of it for us. The last slide was education. We use it in tech-enabling education, but also education about tech development. But again, back to the partnering point, this is a new partnership we formed. This is a really first significant one in digital health. We are open to all types of partnering, so please keep that in mind with us. We've also partnered with IDEO in significant ways, and so many of our rooms look like this now instead of some of the boring anatomy diagrams that we've had up for years. We also partner in a different way in that you can actually go on our website and look at existing technologies that aren't licensed out yet, that are sitting in there. And there are many. So I just wanted to point that out in case you're looking for technologies we might have, which is a little bit of a reverse of the curve. I think the edges are out of sight still with digital health. The potential's endless because the capacity to layer data in ways that we've never had before is at our fingertips. If we work hard on the interoperability piece and the standards and the formats, we can layer clinical data on physiologic data. We can go through this whole list of data that's never intersected before. And at the bottom is consumer analytics. And I think adding that piece so that we look at how patients are affected and impacted and how they're responding to their environments in ways that we can't measure in the clinical care loop. So for example, patients that are moving through the day, they have many forces acting on them, and they physiologically and emotionally respond to them in patterns that could be very telling. Their response could predict that they're going into a deeper depression, or that they're having more difficulty responding from a cardiopulmonary function. So I call that life flow. I coined this term because we understand workflow and how things fit or don't fit in workflow. We've really not tapped life flow very much, and I think that's a really important arena that we're now going to have access to because of the technologies that you're building. But to get from promise to power, or empower, we need to take some serious look at we need to ask some hard questions. Do we need more data? Possibly, but we really need to concentrate on right data, and we need to get that data integrated with other types of data, and we need to make it contextualized and actionable. So that requires interoperability. Please build in mind of how you're going to connect to something else. So you're looking at being a part of an integrated solution. And even if you want to be a standalone company, if you build something without open APIs, I think you're going to really limit your lifespan. So please consider that. And then also the power, the necessity, the absolute essential nature of evaluation. It's sort of new to the whole field of innovation, but I want to stress that. So again, we would love to help and be a partner with you, getting from idea to impact. And I'm going to let my other colleagues talk about where they think they want partnerships. I mostly want to start with what they're doing already. They've each done very creative things at their own centers. We're going to explore a little bit about opportunities, challenges, etc., and we'll continue to reach out for you and invite your partnership. So I'm going to switch over now and join my colleagues, and after that we're going to have a showcase of actual technologies from the front lines of each of our centers.
My next, all right.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rich Roth. I am with Dignity Health. For those of you that may not know Dignity, we are the 5th largest healthcare system in the U.S., not-for-profit. We're in 21 states, and what's kind of the interesting thing about Dignity is depending on where in the country you are, we are a very different entity. Here in San Francisco, we're 2 hospitals. If you're in Phoenix, we are the largest Medicaid health plan in the country. Hospitals, medical groups, retail clinics, integrated care delivery. We're in rural areas, we're in urban areas. And why that's kind of interesting when I sit here next to my colleagues, I mean, we have this fantastic academic medical center, one of the jewels of our country. We have Kaiser, an integrated model of healthcare that much of reform is modeled after. And Dignity is kind of what healthcare looks like in the U.S., right? Which is, what needs to change, right? And so for entrepreneurs and I think for our own employees and physicians, it's a wonderful opportunity to take advantage of this great time that we have to really improve quality, to reduce the cost of care, and to expand access. And so Dignity has a variety of programs, one more towards the intellectual property side that my colleague Jaylene will talk about in a little bit. It is a great example of our employees and our physicians that are creating things every day. We've had their ideas turn into companies that have scaled across Dignity, that have scaled across the country. It's really one of the most fascinating things is one of the most creative disciplines in the hospitals. You probably wouldn't be able to guess it, but it's security guards, right? They see everything that goes on in our care sites. We've had a number of great products and companies that have come from our security guards, in addition to physicians and nurses and others. But what I largely focus on for Dignity is our open innovation effort. And at any given time within Dignity, we're testing 3 to 5 novel companies in 3 focus areas: care transparency and analytics, new care models, and digital health or connected care. I always forget what the new term is, but I think that would be a great that'd be a great innovation for us all to call it the same thing. But so basically what we've established is a program that we call Run Run Jump. And what Run Run Jump is, at a very early stage, is we engage with startup organizations and we work with them and provide them, I think, one of the greatest things that they need to be successful, which is real clinicians, real nurses, real doctors, real patients, real workflow, right? So it takes an idea that's brilliantly designed, that has incredible coding and technology, and puts it into a care setting where you can measure it against actual issues of quality improvement and cost reduction and movement towards the AAA. And so we work with these companies hand in hand to take them through privacy and security screenings, to take them through workflow testing and others, and we set them up against core goals. And if they're able to meet those core goals, they move from our first run to our second run. And so what we do in the second run is essentially we switch something up on them, something major. We take them from a value-based market to a fee-for-service market. We take them from a large market to a small market, a market where there's employed physicians to independent physicians. And that can really test if they're able to achieve similar types of quality goals along different care pathways, whether they're scalable enterprise or not. And then that comes in our third process called our jump. right? Whereas we actively commit to scaling these organizations through Dignity if they can make it through kind of our two pathways. And so, we've started out with early companies like Airstrip Technologies, which is a large healthcare IT company now. We've worked with Propeller Health. I think some of you may have seen the press that we've been doing with Google over the last 6 months with their Glass product. And then that's on the technology side, and on the care model side, we've been working with Theranos, we've been working with NaviHealth and others, and so we're taking them through these various different processes and figuring out ways to truly scale these innovations over time. And I think, the comments earlier on partnership are just so intimately key, because I really think it's one leg in, one leg out. We're never going to have the time, the energy, the engineering talent to be able to truly create these, wonderful products. But at the same time, the digital companies are not, will never have the real workflow, real patients that are just so critical to see if their things work. And if you marry those two together and you focus on outcomes, I think you can create some really wonderful innovations that are going to really improve the lives of us and our families and our neighbors and others. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karen.
Would you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Karen Cook, and I'm with Kaiser Permanente, and we have several innovation programs, and the one that I'm most excited about, because it's my program, is our Innovation Fund for Technology. We're actually part of a larger group called Innovation and Advanced Technology, where we look at emerging technologies that might be integrated into our care delivery or service we provide in, say, 3 to 5 years out. The Innovation Fund for Technology was started back in 2008 by our Chief Information Officer, who really wanted us to create a space for exploration with technology, focus on rapid prototyping, and failing fast when appropriate. So over the years, we've received about 800 ideas. We funded about 100 of them. We have 19 in operations. We take ideas from everyone throughout the organization. So we have 50,000 nurses, 20,000 doctors, and about 100,000 other staff at Kaiser Permanente, and we'll take ideas from everyone. And so the ideas are far-reaching, but several times we have asked innovators to focus their technology ideas on solving some key strategic problems. So we have kind of a hybrid model. We launch these challenges where we say, let's focus on one topic, or we just take any idea, and we're happy with both approaches. And one of the things that we're often asked is, why aren't more projects in operations? And I'd say that's the hard part about innovation, is making that big leap from proof of concept into operations. And so one of the things that we've noticed in 2008 when we launched this fund, everyone said, wow, there's money and people to help us. There's going to be someone who can help me go through security and compliance and legal reviews. Wow, that's amazing. And then they thought, okay, my project has to be as big as possible, so because this is available and it won't happen again. And so there was this feeling that you had to make everything really big. Well, it wasn't the best strategy. And I think it made some of those projects take far longer than they needed to. So we've really changed course and said, okay, let's use funding as a creative constraint. Let's give much less funding and figure out what we can do, quickly answer some tough questions, and then do the traditional kind of stage gating funding. And that's really helped us move projects along and stop projects when they aren't successful. An example of a project that just went live in the last month was one that came out of one of our challenges, where we said, help us with our new members that are joining Kaiser Permanente. We knew with healthcare reform, we'd be getting new members. What can we do? And so we said, let's figure out how to do a digital membership card. And within Kaiser Permanente, when you think of our 9.5 million members, it was actually really tough to see, okay, what systems were working together, how do we make this happen? And so the Innovation Fund said, let's just fund a prototype. Let's not build something, let's do a prototype and test it with members. And we got some great member feedback. We were able to redo the prototype, and people said, yes, let's make this happen. Let's test this. So we tested this with a small group of our members. They loved it. And at an innovation retreat last year, people were very excited about this project, and somebody said, well, how long will it take to get this out to our members? And someone very provocatively said 5 years. There was collective gasp. And people said, no, unacceptable. And so the Innovation Fund was able to provide some bridge funding, and the digital membership card is now live in Southern California and will be available to 5 regions by the end of the year. So I think that that was a great example of how we were really trying to scale the project down so we weren't overwhelmed by this thought of, the digital membership card for everyone doing everything, and scale it and start with really getting that member feedback and understanding how they're going to use it, what makes most sense, and then also it doesn't hurt to be a bit provocative about stating some of the challenges, because it really moved people, and we were able to get the funding, get the teams, and actually deliver something fairly quickly.
Great. Thank you very much. I think when most people think of UCSF, they think of maybe scientific rigor and excellence in care, but rarely innovation and agile. And I think of Dignity as a great example of very innovative, and I think of Kaiser very innovative, and it might be that they have very innovative marketing teams, but both of them seem to be really on the cutting edge of doing innovation from the front lines of healthcare. And I wanted to ask each of you, so first of all, thank you for joining me, because I also wanted to have different models on stage, and I think we've done a nice job there. And I wanted to ask you, each of you in your different settings, how have you been able to create what I call this oasis of agility? Because it is true that in healthcare, we can be slow to shift, and I think there are reasons why we are, and there are reasons that are justifiable and reasons that may not be so justifiable. But even in our own organizations, we might be the real sort of mad dogs, mavericks. And so how have you been able to create something of a sandbox, an oasis of agility, or a tolerance around you for challenging the time course that you just described as an example?
Yeah, I mean, I think first for us, it starts with, I think, two core enablers. One, we have a supportive leadership team. And we have, I think, a pretty visionary CEO in Lloyd Dean that, truly believes in the power to change and the power of our organization to help, right, to partner and to make things happen. Two is, out of necessity or out of strategy, whatever you would say, the reason is we have a culture of partnership. Right? And we don't believe at Dignity. We believe at Dignity we have some fantastic and great things, but we believe plenty of others have better things. And when you put the two together, you've created something even synergistically more than that. And so when we search out for things, we search out for best-in-class partners, and that's helped us be a better partner. And understand the give and take of working with disparate types of organizations. And the third thing I would say is, healthcare reform has been a real enabler of this. I mean, I would never say all pockets of Dignity have like this thirst and passion for innovation, but I think as we think about our population health arm and how we're moving towards the future of care, there's a freedom and an ability to experiment there. And I think we all believe, if someone is the expert in population health or in ACOs or whatever you said, that would have been demonstrated years ago, right? You would have seen that in their quality, you would have seen that in their costs, they would have seen that in their outcomes. And the reality is no one's there, right? And so, why not us? Why not us with our partners being, excellent in this area? And so that's really a thirst and a passion that we've really tried to address.
And have you found a way to create a zone where people are free to move about the country and experiment without scaring too many people in the big system?
Yeah, well, one of the resources we have is our Garfield Innovation Center, and that's actually located here by the Oakland Airport, and I call it, and communications may not like me calling this, but the Hollywood set for our hospitals and medical clinics, because you can go in there and you can get facilities. And one of our projects was around the pediatric NICU and trying to figure out how can we redesign that for our new hospitals. The Oakland Hospital is opening next week, and it has the design that was developed at the Garfield Center, where you bring in the whole care team, you bring in facilities, and you bring in IT, and you work it, and you move a wall over 1 foot, and you put the big machines here, and you get to experiment in a safe zone. And you're role playing, and we do all the IDEO thing, Post-its everywhere, but that is a safe space. And we also have found ways to bring that to our region, so we can kind of recreate some of that prototyping, even if they're not in our innovation center. And I think that's been really helpful for us to, both innovate, and that's where we also bring in a ton of companies for us to really test the technologies. And one of the things we do are tech forums, and that's something that allows us to show our internal employees ways that they might find tech solutions to the problems they have. And so that's a great way when, if they can take some time out of their day to come and explore these new opportunities. And we'll do them on a variety of topics depending on what the business needs and what we're hearing from our care teams. And so that's been a way that we allow for innovation and try to get as many people involved with it as possible.
We're going to move to the showcase in just a second, but I wanted to ask, I'm going to put out 2 questions, and you can pick which one you want to answer. One of them is...
Good to go first.
Shotgun. So one of the challenges is we're necessarily building solutions for the problems we have today, but we have to be very mindful that healthcare is changing rapidly and build solutions that will also fit into, I hate to use the phrase over and over, but where the puck is going. So we're having to do simultaneously try to fix things that we've got going on right now and also aim for where things are going to be. So that's one question is how are you managing that? And another is, do you think that there are changes in the way that people are being rewarded or viewed as a successful employee? For instance, it's not been a criteria that creativity was something that your merit increase or your promotion was based on, but are you finding that those types of models, is it embraced at that level in the university so an individual is really supported even in that way?
Would you like to choose first?
Sure. Well, I'll go with the second one, just about how people are rewarded. So in the last few years, we have, Kaiser Permanente has done a lot around identifying core behaviors for employees, and innovation is one of them. So they're really asking people to, whatever role they have, to look at things from an innovative perspective and always be looking for those opportunities for us to be doing better, to be doing something new or planning for the future. From the Innovation Fund perspective, we started, in our first year doing awards. And I had no idea how big a deal that was. I was new to Kaiser, and it's huge. Culturally, the awards really make a difference, and they're really well received. And we reward not only the outcomes, but the process of innovation, because we think it's hard. People are taking risks, and they're doing this above their normal day job of seeing patients or speaking with our members. And and we reward failure. So for those teams who know that they need to shut the project down and close it early. And so we also celebrate that.
Good answer.
So, and the kind of foot in two boats, I guess, our question. We've been focusing on themes, as a way to address that, right? So connected health, as an example, is a theme. And we know, I'll talk about a company that we work with called Propeller Health, which is essentially a asthma inhaler with a sensor on it, right? we know that in areas that we are fully capitated, we're fully in charge of the cost of care, we can begin to implement technologies like that and measure their effects on reducing ED visits, reducing length of stay, and other types of measures. Understand that today, understand what the clinical workflow is today, how physicians respond, how patients respond, and we can do that in isolated markets as preparation to scale when the rest of the areas of our country, or our delivery system certainly, move in that direction. And so that's the one thing that's, I think, helpful, in our case for that, is that you have these geographies that move very differentially, but it allows you to test something at a certain stage that hopefully another community will be ready for over time.
Well, that's a really good solution to that, because we get stuck sometimes about where to spend the energy. I'd like to move on and give the teams who've come today a chance to show some work that they've actually done. And we were going to start with the Dignity team. So would you mind introducing Shane?
Yeah, sure.
We're going to do sort of lightning round pitches and discussions, but each of these teams is going to be available afterwards in the room to the left, or stage left. So please spend a little bit of time to drill down deeper with each of them. They're at different stages, sorry.
Yeah, no. So my colleague Jaylene Casano, Jaylene is one of our senior nurse leaders in Dignity Health in Arizona, and she's actually in charge of our performance excellence team there, which is kind of, our lean Six Sigma human-centered design approach to taking a look at care problems and figuring out how we can enact process improvements. And again, this function broadly across Dignity's got a lot of very creative people, and proud to call a lot of them really great colleagues, because they see things and study them truly at the front lines, whether it means care improvement, whether it means workflow, and on occasion they come up with very novel ways to address problems. And I think we're catching CareCheck at a very really interesting stage where it's just moving into a type of prototype stage, but we're very excited about it and love to have her share more.
So good afternoon, everyone. So I get the coveted after lunch spot, so hopefully you'll stay with me here. So I would first like to acknowledge my partner in crime in invention this product. Dana Gray was not able to be with us today, but she's definitely very instrumental in this process. So CareCheck is actually, it's what the working name is for this tool. This tool identifies and eliminates diagnostic variability. And as Rich mentioned, we're in a very, very early stage, proof of concept, and we've built a prototype. But we are testing in operations. We've moved into operations, but really CareCheck has only existed for a couple of weeks. So it's super early, but I'm thrilled to show you what we have done so far. So for our problem statement, I'm just going to keep this super, super simple and avoid all the context. But we decided we overtest people. And there's a lot of places, a lot of settings where we do this through our healthcare system. And so we wanted to cut through all the complicated, complex reasons that are driving providers to have variability in their practices, whether it's where they were trained or malpractice concerns or just a gut feeling about a patient, or they've had a bad experience in the past, or the list goes on and on when you talk to providers. So we really just wanted to cut through all of that and say, okay, well, that may be the case, but we would like to fix that and see if we can surface where variability exists and then eliminate that variability that actually is not necessary and is not giving value to patients. So this is a picture of CareCheck as it is today. In this early prototype version, it has many functions and features that we've built in. I'm going to tell you just about a couple of them today due to time. But if you'd like to speak more about it afterwards, I am going to be outside and we can talk a little bit more about it. So the entire process of CareCheck-based improvements includes identification of patients and issues of concern to a particular site or a particular operation, whether it's an ER or urgent care or a clinic. So identifying those issues, and then concurrent monitoring of those issues, providing immediate feedback to the providers on what their practices are, and then provider learning and behavior really takes place. So that's the gist of the idea. So obviously we're striking in really 3 dimensions: lowering the cost of care, precision medicine, as was mentioned earlier, and then also provider decision making, and help support their learning and development as well. So a few features. The whole CareCheck package includes analysis, comparisons, and reporting features, and a lot of them you can read there. I won't read the slide to you. But I will read that the areas where we currently are testing CareCheck in operations includes the symptom areas of abdominal pain, and we've built in segments for male abdominal pain, female abdominal pain that's not gynecological, and then female abdominal pain that is gynecological. Then also cardiac symptoms, respiratory symptoms, psychiatric disorder symptoms, and also we built a module for repeat ER patients as well, so that we can learn about those patients and what we're doing to those patients when they come see us. So why this is different, the old way of approaching the whole, let's figure out what providers are ordering for patients. Really, the old way of doing this is to focus on diagnosis codes. So there's a significant lag time with that, and in working with providers over the years, they just find it really difficult to have meaningful learning from the reports that are given to them with such high detail and in such a lag time that they really can't anchor it to that particular patient or groups of patients and decisions that they made at that time. So just haven't seen a lot of learning in that particular space. So what CareCheck does, CareCheck's actually concurrent and it's symptom-based. So we built in for all the ways that a patient comes in and tells you that they have abdominal pain, it will all route to abdominal pain, for example. So this is a picture of, let me see how large you can see that. So it's pretty small for you. So what this picture is showing us is that it's basically showing how desired reports from CareCheck are selected, and then how the patient segments are selected for either a provider or a group of providers. It can do either. And for example, on this specific example, we have selected to see non-gynecological patients that were discharged from this test site ED between July 1st and May 31st, 2014, so July 1st, 2013 through 2014, so almost a year. For all providers, the distribution percentage of all the imaging tests that they ordered for those patients. So also with these patients, we actually know that they aren't sick, if you will. That's what the healthcare clinicians call patients who can be discharged immediately. They're not sick. These patients were not sick, and yet the observation was by our ER providers that the not sick patients were worked up in fact, very similarly than the sick patients were that actually got admitted. So when our providers saw an example of a report similar to this, they clearly identified opportunity for imaging reduction in the not sick abdominal pain patients. This is just a very simple report, and what we're seeing here is an example of the current look of CareCheck and how an individual provider worked up abdominal pain patients in comparison to the rest of her group. And so the individual provider here has 213 patients, and her group has 3,314 patients. And the blue bar is the group, and the yellow bar is this particular provider. So when our test site ER physician leadership saw something that was similar to this with this provider, they actually saw an opportunity for improvement and learning and development for that provider, and then they have their performance management process. We also have built in a daily report, and so this is how you would select once you've identified those conditions that you're looking for, and you're focusing then on them every day with the physicians. This is how we would select that daily report, and we can do that by patient, condition, or provider. And then for I have an example here. This is just another way of looking at the daily report to show you how we can kind of drill down. But again, you're only doing this with patients of interest that have fallen out and shown to be a variable practice. The provider had a variable practice, so then you're running that report and discussing it with that provider. So even though CareCheck, the tool is basically used, the circle of effectiveness is what we call it, and I'll show you later, but it's basically used to identify and eliminate variability from day to day. I have learned from our providers that they also like to see our practice over the course of time. And so this helps them understand what their kind of community practice standard is for the way that they work up these patients. And for companies such as Dignity Health, there are several ways that we could use this. One might be that we would look at the patients with the same symptoms are coming in to our urgent cares and our ERs and our clinics, and are our physicians working up imaging and lab for those patients in the same way, or are they doing that differently? We're starting to see that they're doing that differently in some cases. And so as a company, this helps us understand that and partner with ED physician leadership, urgent care physician leadership, to understand the reasons. Sometimes there are reasons for differences, but we need to understand what those reasons are. And then we also have an intention to begin to marry this with quality and outcomes data as well. Our physicians, of note, when they saw this, a couple ways that they would like to use this. They'd like to use this to monitor and orient their new physicians, particularly in the ER. And then also we're talking about using this as a learning and development tool or possibly even a supervisory tool for residency programs as well. So we did actually take the time, even though this is our very basic prototype, couple of weeks old tool here, we did take the time to build in quite a few outcomes reports. So we do have things such as length of stay, variable cost of care, other things that would be really important, number of tests per patient, just things that as we try to put together the proof of concept to move further, that we have automated all of that. So just a couple reports there. There's a variable cost report. So this is the circle, what I call the circle of effectiveness. And I've been hearing this all day long in a lot of presentations, that it's not just about the people or the tool and the data, it's about the people stuff and how the whole system works together. So for me, I always think of that really in terms of 3 dimensions. One is having a systematic operating system, which would include your tools and data. And then having a real robust and tight performance management system, and then that working together get your mindset and behavior changes. So any questions, please contact me. And, well, I guess I had a contact slide, but there's my number and my counterpart's number, or stop by afterwards and I'll give you a business card. Thank you.
Thanks, Jaylene. Thank you very much, Jaylene. So combinations of personnel, process, and technology there. I'd like to next introduce Pierre Gouraud, who's a faculty member in the Department of Neurology at UCSF. You're going to see several different types of things presented here today. In our work and innovation, it's everywhere from big data to nanosensors, so we tried to present a bit of a variety.
Thank you, Ainhoa. I'm very glad to be here, and for those of you that are following the World Cup, France is currently beating Switzerland 5-0. It's pretty amazing.
Thanks for the update.
Wow.
So, if I can have the slides. Yeah. So, I'll actually show you 5-1. Okay, fair enough.
Shout it out.
Fair enough.
need the updates.
I'm a faculty at UCSF in the Department of Neurology. I'm a geneticist and mathematician by training. And what I would like to talk to you about today is MIRA Medicine. It's a company we founded, we spun off out of a research project. Basically, I founded that with Raphael, who's not here today to talk to you about the company. But MIRA Medicine is a software company that supports complex decision making. So we've been working on that company with one first disease we've been working on. It's one of the disease we're really working a lot at UCSF, multiple sclerosis, MS. And we've been introducing what we think is the first precision medicine technology for complex disease. We heard a lot of big data and precision medicine for cancer, and I would generally talk about, generally speaking, about genetically informed practice of medicine. With disease like MS, there's a lot of genetics, but there's also many other features that we are very interested in, and that's one of the screen capture of the app I'll show you in a minute. But maybe the first thing is why MS and why complex disease like multiple sclerosis? It's truly a complex phenotype to look at. It's truly a multifactorial disease where we know it results from the interplay of genetics and environment and very complex immunological manifestation. The most difficult challenge for patients is actually the variability over time and across patients. So basically, once the diagnostic is there, you don't know if in the matter of years you're going to be in a wheelchair, or maybe you'll be still working 20 years from there. That's very difficult for patients. That's also very difficult for physicians, because for them, the question is when to start treating, which is the best therapy we have. And things are very different from what they were just 5 years ago. We now have 9 treatments. So the question is not so much about, hey, let's have another one, and we already know that we'll have probably 15 drugs by 2015. The question is really, what is the right drug for the right patient? And what we want to avoid is this terrible, let's try and see kind of cycle that patients have to go through. So our goal with this application is say, okay, let's not work on a new drug, let's work on a way to accelerate the path to the right treatment. So our goal is really threefold. We assess an individual patient from multiple data points over time and from really different sources of data, genetics, MRI, relapses, and the clinic, and etc. More importantly, our technology enabled the comparison of patients to similar patients that we have in the database. And I'm coming from a few blocks away. We are a great research institution. We're seated on gigabytes and terabytes of data that are actually not used to make the right decision for patients. For the past 10 years, my group has spent $16 million in studying just 600 patients. These are not really used for other patients. So that's really what we wanted to create here, is a window into all this data we created. And hopefully, when we're doing that, it helps planning and really making a personalized, evidence-based decision about treatment. So let me show you what it looks like. And so it's a live demo. It's a little bit risky. It's like playing in a World Cup. That's my kids and my wife. I'll be very short, but essentially through the Wi-Fi, I've been pulling this data for that one patient. So it's real time, it's going through the Wi-Fi. And what you can see here in blue is the actual one patient we're talking about. We're showing here one data called EDSS. It's a functional disability score for multiple sclerosis. You can think about this score so the higher the worse, and the lower is the better is for the patient. There's many scores like that in every kind of complex disease. They're not always perfect, but at least they summarize the functional disability for one patient. So what you can see here is that we can pull the data to really give a longitudinal view of how the patient has been evolving over time. And that's great because we're not doing that at UCSF, where we have all this great electronic medical record system, but we're not able to show a patient how he has been doing over the past 10 years. So that's the first thing we kind of solve using this technology. That's not really what we were interested in. In addition to the data, you can see here, we're also showing what kind of treatment the patient was on over time. So it's just a nice way to show the data and usually better explain the patient how they have been doing over time. What I was really interested in, and actually one way to think about that is because of my kids. When I take my kids to the pediatrician, they weigh the baby, and the pediatrician will tell me, your baby boy is a little bit too big. I say, no, he's not. What they're going to actually do to convince me that my baby boy is probably a little bit too big, and they're going to use reference growth curves, and they're going to spot my kid and say, hey, you know what, your baby boy is in the top 2% of the American boys? Wow, that's a quantified piece of evidence that I will remember, and every time I'm going to snack my son, it's like, you know, maybe I should calm down on the snack. So that's a great idea. I'm not exactly sure why pediatricians have been doing precision medicine that way for a long period of time, but say, hey, that's a great idea. So I should do the same for every kind of metrics we have, given that we have all this reference data. So the orange background here is really what matters. It's a distribution over time of how severe are the other patients in the database. So for this first time point here, so back in 2001, the patient was doing pretty well. She was kind of in the 50%. So 50% of the reference patient have higher scores, 50% have lower scores. And over time, you can see that she's been flaring up. She was in the top 10% here, and then really among the extreme. So that's actually a piece of quantified evidence to assess the normality of the trajectory of that patient. And that's also something that correlates pretty well with when we started treated with actually a second-line therapy here. So we're showing that, and we're really informing the decision-making by bringing population data. So if you're not very happy about the reference population that our algorithm kind of automatically selects, well, we're also empowering the physician and the patient to select who they want to get from the database. So MS is affecting predominantly females, so if you want to switch off the males, well, it can do that automatically, and then it will reset the reference population in the background. And then you'll see if that changed anything or not in the information you were delivering. So we're doing that for a lot of classical data. We're also doing that for less classical piece of information that we're actually deriving from MRIs or so any metrics we can compute from brain imaging, spinal cord imaging, eye imaging, and many kind of tracking. So we're really also, it's a way to accelerate making available new type of data for neurologists and patients. And we also tried to expand that not only to very simple variables and data we have, we also tried to extend that concept, and if the Wi-Fi is quick enough, I'll be able to show you MRI data. So we stored all the MRIs that we have for the patients in the cloud, and we start to make available different types of MRIs, and also different overlays on the top of the black and white images, because that's not necessarily extremely informative. We can actually support and contextualize each of these images over time, and the key is really to have access, in using all this technology, to have access to the information to see the brain, and to see that also over time, because what we can do, so not only in 3D like that, and I tell you my son loved to do that, I would do that for hours, but also if we want to follow the brain of a patient, and that particular patient here has a huge lesion, what we can, it's actually 4D, because we can move back in time, say how this patient was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, there was no lesion in there, and obviously maybe there was a little bit of something right there. So what we can do also is actually show what are the measures. We have measures of the myelin, which is the insulation around the neurons that is impaired in MS. We can actually see in that particular region of the brain what are the measures that were computed. So I think that's what has been driving our efforts is really make all the data available, so including genetics and biomarkers and etc., including MRI, even if it's technologically challenging. We just went through a pile of 6 CD-ROMs that, if you're lucky, you would get from your neuroradiologist. And once you have this data, we want to implement comparisons and eventually support decision making. So if we can go back to the slides, that's pretty much so the big 3 steps that we've taken is really aggregate all type of information we have into a single view and single tool that can help us accessing all the information, even if it's not usually accessible at the point of care, and implement and making easy the comparison of individual patient to tailored group of patients that will really enable us to take the best of our own research cohort, eventually from the EMR, all the EMR we're accumulating at big centers like UCSF, and eventually as well clinical trial data. So the key concept is this contextualization. I want to understand one, in the context of a reference database, one in reference to many. We have a great team of people that we've been working through for the past 2 years, developing this first prototype. And the way we see that is, for now, we're kind of version 1. We have a great prototype where we will be able to aggregate even more data to anticipate disease course. I haven't shown you the very preliminary prediction tool that we have. And ultimately, we think that because we have access to all this information, we'll be able to recommend an optimal therapeutic path. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Pierre. It's a very exciting project, and it is a way that we can demonstrate that we can actually build technologies that are helpful in our setting, but then translate them out of the university. And not that it's easy, but Pierre's been working through that for quite a while. I'd like to introduce the next speaker. We have 2 more to showcase if you can stick around. One is from Kaiser, and this is Dr. Hiro. And I think you're going to do a quick demonstration here, and then you're also going to be available. And this is, I'm not exactly sure, because I'm really interested in seeing this, a game that addresses hemorrhagic events at the time of birth, apparently. So this is going to be interesting. It doesn't sound like a time to play around.
So I'm filling in for Dr. Sonia Suhu, who is an OBGYN for Kaiser Permanente. And she said, every day as I'm driving to work and I'm going to, deliver however many babies, she's running through all of the critical event scenarios that might take place. They don't happen that often, but she needs to be prepared when they do happen. And she thought, okay, this is my drive to work, and how do I really get practice in this? And she thought of her teenage daughters who were obsessed with any of the musical games, and she focused on Guitar Hero. She said, well, what if we could be Dr. Hero and make a game of these critical event scenarios. So what she did was apply for an Innovation Fund grant, and we partnered with her to develop a game that leads care teams through the clinical protocol for treating obstetrical hemorrhage. So, it has a physiological engine, so you see the patient declining if you're not doing the right treatment. You get points for doing the right things. You have the after-action review, so you know what you did right, what you did wrong. And it's really using gamification techniques to help clinicians and care teams learn the right protocol. And so we have this game here, and let's see if I can get it working. But, I'd be happy to also show it over there, especially if there are any doctors in the house. All the sound with the game and the vital sign sounds are real triggers. So when our clinicians use this, for me, I just know the protocol because I've tested this game thousands of times. But for them, they're listening to all the cues that they have. So it's been interesting to see how different gamification techniques come into this game. So in the interest of time, I'm going to show it out in the foyer there.
Great, thank you. I do look forward to seeing it. They're actually now moving it from one Kaiser to the next and transferring it between hospitals now. So our last speaker is Adam Gazale, who's in the neurosciences. And I think many of you have heard of him before, either in Nature magazine or on NPR or some television show. But he's done some really innovative work that he developed at the university, tested the effectiveness of it. It's based on his neuroscience research, and he's translated it successfully out into company. So I'd like to go ahead and have Adam present.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Can you hear me? Great. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick tour of some of the work we're doing and how we're translating it into a company and into an actual product. So is this advanced? Okay, I just want to start with the very high-level goal of what we're trying to do and what's important to us in our lab. And I would sort of paraphrase that. Oh, did I skip that? Can you go back one slide, please? Sorry. As developing an effective approach to improve cognition, and this applies both to healthy individuals and those that are impaired. And I would say from the perspective of thinking about healthy people, it's really the basis of education, right? Not just the transmission of content, but improving the information systems that are the fundamentals of cognition. From the impaired point of view, it's essentially the basis of the entire healthcare system from a mental health point of view, to improve cognition and the emotional abilities of those that are suffering. So it's a really high-level goal, and it's a very global goal. And so how do we go about that? The first I want to do is emphasize that our current approach is not very strong, both on the education side and on the clinical side. I'm just going to give an example from something that's more familiar to my clinical background, and that's an older adult, like a 6-year-old, that has the complaints of changes in their attention or memory ability. Maybe it reaches the level that they're concerned or the significant other's concerned, and next thing they know, they're in a doctor's office with this problem in that they're losing their car keys too often, or in this example, they're showing up at the refrigerator too often, not knowing what they're supposed to be doing there. And the doctor is going to interact with them, hear the story, and then this is likely what's going to happen even, I'm going to step over here because I think it'll be easy to see a lot of you, even at the best medical centers, is that what happens is this. The first thing is that we get a very poor characterization. Even at a place like UCSF, which has a top neurology center, we very infrequently would do functional brain imaging. We're not going to break down all the aspects of cognition that are accounting for this behavior. And if we reach a high level of concern, we're going to treat it. And how we're going to treat it is going to be this way, right? It's going to be with a pill. The problem with that is that it's incredibly poorly targeted. So it might target to a neurotransmitter system, but what it doesn't do is activate a circuit in the brain or a network. Therefore, you want it with a non-selective effect. And in order to get the effect at a strong enough, at a robust enough level, what we do is increase the dose, and then you wind up with side effects. To the degree that probably 80% of what psychiatrists and neurologists often do are treating the side effects that are caused by the very therapeutic approach that they're taking. So that's a big problem. The other problem is that it's almost entirely non-personalized. So although these are, population data that guide the prescription pathway that we take, we know that there's incredible heterogeneity in that population. None of that is coming across in the prescription. It's not in any way targeting this individual's specific problem and their brain. The other approach is that the problem is that it's unimodal, right? So even though that we know that there's a host of other ways to improve brain health, like physical exercise, very frequently what you'll see is that the prescription is just for a single drug. And we don't really have a very good ability to predict what the interaction between other approaches are. So this unimodal approach, this very siloed approach to therapy, is a serious problem in both neurology and psychiatry. But the biggest problem is that these are open loop systems. And by that, I mean that when you give a medication, even though it's coming in very non-targeted, the person takes it home, they take the medication for, let's say, a couple months, they try to observe as best they can what the positive effects are, what the side effects are, then they return to their physician months later, give this subjective impression, and then a non-empirical decision is based to increase or decrease the dose based on that, and then months pass again. And this is an open loop system. We know that the most powerful way to change anything is through a closed loop, where you apply an intervention, you observe the effects, you adjust, and you reapply. And this closed loop feedback system is how you change anything, and it's the opposite of how our current system works right now, and I would say that this is just not good enough. And in 2014, that this is sort of the state of the art that we treat cognitive problems is really falling short. And so my lab has been very excited about trying to come up with an approach that's targeted, personalized, multimodal, and closed loop. And this is a very long-term mission to do this. But what I'm going to show you now is just a quick example of an experiment in our lab that took 5 years and the data that it produced, just a snapshot of the data. And then how this leaves our lab, translates into a company and into a product that's now going through further validation. So how do you change the brain? Well, it's a good thing that our brain has its own natural fuel of change known as plasticity. Plasticity is the ability of our brain to respond and change itself chemically, structurally, functionally, in response to new experiences. Our goal is just to harness the brain's natural plasticity. One of the ways that we do that is through interactions with very immersive, enjoyable, engaging software platforms known as video games. So 5 years ago, I reached out to friends of mine that worked at LucasArts, George Lucas's video game company in the Presidio that's unfortunately no longer with us, and presented them with the challenge of helping our lab build a game that I had the basic design parameters for to improve cognitive abilities in healthy older adults, to build out the game and then to study it just like we would any other therapy with careful controls, neural recordings, so the video game had to be built that you can be played while we're recording brain activity, both functional MRI and EEG. I just want to give you a quick look at what the game looked like as an experiment. So you're driving a car along a road using a joystick, left, right, you go push up to go up the hill, and then these signs appear. And the signs, you have to respond as rapidly and accurately to your targets, like these green circles, but not to red circles and not green pentagons, which is actually quite hard not to respond to. Some of the secret, not secrets, but the special elements of the game are that there's 2 adaptive loops going here. And by that, I mean that each of the challenges on the 2 tasks are scaling in real time to changes in performance. So the game is constantly assessing how you're doing and in a closed loop fashion feeding back a scaled challenge to you. So it's entirely personalized. And then we use reward systems to make us change the brain in the direction we want. So for example, in this game, you only get the level up, the big reward, if both of those skills go increase. And so it prevents trading off. So what we do is we create this game and others in our lab now that have this sort of complex integration between adaptivity and feedback. And then we do studies on them. And we get both behavioral and neural measures from these studies. So here's a plot across the lifespan using this video game as a diagnostic. 0% means that you have no cost of multitasking. It means that you do that sign task as well when you do it alone as compared to when you do it driving at the same time. If you ask a 20-year-old, they will be sure that they have a 0% cost. They are experts at multitasking. They practice it every day, but they're not very good at it. They drop 27% in their ability to do the 2 tasks simultaneously. And then if you look what happens across a lifespan, this is what we see. We have a linear decline. It's not just a problem with being older, whatever that is. It's basically an issue of not being 24 years old anymore. And so the brain goes through this stepwise decline in this ability. The biggest difference between 2 adjacent decades are actually between 20 years old and 30 years old, interestingly enough. So it's even an early life aging issue. We could then look at what happens early. This is not part of this paper, but we see that 8 to 12-year-olds are sort of like in the 35-year-old range. So this is something that builds up and then declines. And this mimics a lot of other fluid cognitive skills. But we could record activity during gameplay using a high-density GCAP like you see here, and we get a measure of the prefrontal cortex engagement known as midline frontal theta. And if we take a look at this in 20-year-olds, so what you're looking at here is a plot looking down on the average brain of a 20-year-old with the nose pointing up, and you can see there's this burst, this yellow activity right in the middle. This occurs at the most challenging part of the game, right when a sign comes up and you're also driving. You get this burst within 1/3 of a second. If you're a 70-year-old, this is what it looks like. So it's a burst, but not really above 50%, I'd say, at the green level. Then what we could do is take this game and have people bring it home with them and use cloud-based data capture and really try to push this ability. So our older adults in this study did this for 12 hours over the course of a month, 1 hour a day, 3 days a week for 4 weeks. Then we bring them back and we see what they look like. And this is what they look like, just a quick snapshot of both the behavior on the game and what happened to their brain. So we had a really robust increase in performance. You could see the activities reaching the red level. They exceeded 2 control groups, which for the sake of time I'm not showing you here, but you can certainly check that out in the paper. They exceeded the 20-year-olds on their single visit. We also showed that many skills that were not in the game, for example, working memory to remembering faces, which is nowhere entered in the game at all, and a vigilance task, attention to a very rare target in a very boring, sparse environment, also improved, although they weren't trained selectively in the training group and not in the control groups. And also this ability right here, this multitasking ability on the game, lasted for 6 months without any booster. So it gives us at least the beginning of some confidence that we have some ability to make meaningful changes using this technology that are both transferable to other skills and sustainable over time, and understand the neural mechanism that leads to that. We were fortunate to have this paper published in Nature last year with a really exciting but very intimidating title for me of Game Changer, which then led to months of really telling the media that I'm not saying that this particular game is the game changer. That's not really the idea here. It's that the approach of building a customized game that's targeting a deficit in a population and then validating it in a careful, controlled study with mechanism, that's what I hope becomes more prominent in the literature if we're going to compete with the pharma industry, or at least complement it, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry and really the main medical approach to treating these diseases. So right now, I just want to give you a quick snapshot, and then I'm done, of what the game looks like now. So over the years that we were doing that study, that took 5 years to show you that data over there, I filed a patent at UCSF on the methodology that drives the game, and helped co-found the company called Achille Interactive Labs that is part based in Boston, part based here in the Bay Area, and I serve as a science advisor for it. And the company now took all of the methodology, the mechanics of that game, and then brought it into a way more immersive and mobile platform, so it's an iPad game, that uses the same elements but brings on a much higher level of art and music and story. And I think that's really key. I think with those elements, we don't even need violence in our video games to make them immersive and enjoyable. And now the plan is to move forward and to validate this further. So I'll just wrap up after I show you this, but I want you to see sort of what happens when a game, as the one you saw sort of looks like, a 1980s Atari game, what happens when it leaves the lab and then has a full-time game design team. Actually, interestingly enough, the game designers from Lucas are now full-time at this company, and they helped build the next version. So just to point out a couple things, you could see the same abilities being challenged of picking signs and navigating. Now the adaptivity in the game occurs every second, much higher level of reward interactivity, as you could see. All 8 to 12-year-olds told us in our pilot testing was that they wanted to customize their avatar. You could see that here as well. The interesting thing about it is that the company's decision was not to make this a consumer product, so you won't find this on the iTunes store, but this is in validation studies now to try to go through a pathway of FDA approval. The first 2 targets are ADHD and early Alzheimer's disease. Interestingly enough, so that's what's happening right now. It's in feasibility testing. I just only serve as an advisor in this role now. Interestingly enough, 2 of the first investors were Shire Pharmaceutical, which makes Adderall for ADHD, and Pfizer, which makes Aricept for Alzheimer's disease. So it's an interesting, maybe changing of the times that we have big pharma investing in a video game company, maybe like an oil company investing in solar energy. But anyway, I'm pretty excited to see what happens, but hopefully you'll see that game if those studies show that it passes the next level of validation. Thank you. Thank you.
Adam, thank you very much. I thank you for your attention. We've run late, but I think we felt like, how do you stop these people from talking, because they're so exciting what they're doing. Thank you to my colleagues from Kaiser and Dignity Health, and to Jill.
Huge.
Thank you very much.